So, yesterday was International Women's Day, and I thought perhaps we could talk for a moment about a slogan that has become quite popular among feminists, even women at large, honestly, and is very popular at women's marches. You always see this sign at women's marches these days, um, and that is the future is female. Now, first of all, would it be acceptable for men to go around holding signs that say the future is male? Would it be acceptable for whites to hold signs that say the future is white? If no, then why on earth is it acceptable for women to go around proclaiming that the future of our world is female? In what way is that acceptable? Fun historical fact, you know how much I love history and this whole topic. The future is female is not a slogan that originated with the women's marches or the National Organization for Women or modern day feminism at all. Not even with Hillary Clinton, even though she loudly, boldly proclaimed it in one of her recent speeches. By the way, can you imagine for a moment being a boy or a young man in the audience or watching this speech on television and hearing a presidential candidate announce loudly, the future is not gender? Don't get me started on that. Um, not going to start. But the slogan, the future is female, was coined by a woman named Sally Miller Gearhart. She was a tenured professor at the University of San Francisco, very ardent feminist, radical lesbian activist. She helped develop some of the very first women's studies and gender studies courses um, that for being taught in universities that are still used and built upon today. Anyway, she was an outspoken feminist, if that did not go without saying. And she titled her 1982 essay, "The Future, If There Is One, is Female." And this is where this slogan originated. In this essay, she seriously proposed that we reduce males to 10% of the world's population. And her essay theorized about how exactly the world needs to go about doing that. That the best option she saw was male infanticide. But that because this would be a hard sell to the masses, the more acceptable option would be to develop the abortion industry, make advances in the medical field, so that we could promote sex selective abortions and kill off most of the world's boys that way instead. What is my point? My point is that feminism has thoroughly rotten roots. It does not have virtuous beginnings. The slogans and tenets that you see radical feminists parading around with today were, in fact, many of the exact same principles upon which the supposedly noble earlier feminism was actually founded. It's not hard to go back in history, read a few documents, manifestos, and see that for yourself. Of course, that's not the narrative being peddled in our high school history books or our university textbooks, but the original suffragettes were domestic terrorists. They were horrible people, not to be confused with the suffragists, who were made up of men and women campaigning for the vote. But you may be thinking, why does this matter? Is it relevant? And I get this all the time. It's irrelevant what feminism's beginnings were. What is it today? And I say, is it? Is it really irrelevant? Within any ideology or movement or cause or religion, you're going to have people who do not represent that ideology accurately, right? So if you're going to find out what that movement or whatever stands for, what do? What do you look at? You look at its founders, you read its manifestos, you look at its writings, right? You cannot base your your perception of a movement or ideology solely upon its random members or followers. It matters where feminism had its beginnings, because a lot of the baffling behavior that you see today exhibited by what we would call radical feminists, is not actually as wacko, extreme. Well, it is extreme, but it is not this, tiny radical branch of feminism that, would have had the founders turning over in their graves. No, they are quite honestly, it's feminism playing itself out to its logical conclusion. Of course, I use logical loosely there because there is no logic actually involved. But saying that most feminists, the average feminist, is about reducing the male population and killing male boys, of course not. Of course not. Definitely not. But you have to understand what the purpose of the movement is if you're going to attach yourself to it. And unfortunately, many women have attached themselves to a movement that is about something they're not aware it is about. The original founders were almost all Marxists, and they were very anti-male, very anti-family, very anti-home. And they simply needed followers. And so even though most women were not like them in any way, they played upon some very real grievances that women had at the time. And of course, there was chauvinism at the time, as there always has been. Also misandry, let's not forget the reverse. But the truth is that, I guess my point is, if you think that feminism is really about women's rights, and all you really want are equal human rights, bare bones human rights for women, then pitch the feminist title. You don't need to be a feminist to fight for rights of women, including in countries where they genuinely do not have human rights. There's no good reason to hitch your cart to this psychotic horse. You can still accomplish what it is that you think that feminism is about without attaching yourself to a movement that is rooted in something far more sinister. And I use that word not loosely. I'm pregnant, and I'm incoherent when I'm pregnant. But this is just one little part of the equation, one little story, one little historical tidbit. But I felt like talking about it because there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of awareness about feminism's roots or the actual history of feminism. I have had anti-feminist friends who have said, when I was in college, I took a women's study course or gender studies, and I came out of there feeling so, so enlightened. I've been so enlightened about the purposes of feminism and why it had to be in. And then they started doing their own historical digging, and they realized that what they had been peddled in university was, at best, one side of the story, and in most cases, very clearly an agenda-driven curriculum with a purpose that was not to tell an accurate tale of anything. So, for the record, the future, if we hope to have much of one, is human, made up of males and females who appreciate and complement one another's unique attributes and do not find themselves at war with one another. I'll stop talking for now. It's way too long. Bye.